Hey, folks, this is a really special, weird episode of the VGB's podcast. We're not going to be talking about video games today unless my guest really surprises me. But for those who may not know, because we had a lot of people join from last week, I'm a native Texan, born and raised here in the North Texas area, spent some time in Austin, went away for a decade out to LA and some other places, and moved back recently to North Texas. Texas is still kind of ground zero for a lot of our immigration discussion nationwide, and things have certainly changed a lot since early November and in mid January. So, my guest today is an immigration attorney based in Central Texas and the founder of Lincoln-Goldfinch Law. You can find her online under the handle Abogada Kate, which is Spanish for lawyer for my non-Spanish speakers, and at abogadakate.com. I am so happy to welcome Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch to the show. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here chatting with you.
Yeah. I love your background, by the way. Just like really floral and fun, and it's
Thank
good. It's
you.
nice. Yeah,
It's
it's
like,
nice.
we spend a lot of time in our offices trying to make it a sanctuary.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. I think I want to start by asking you, what is your kind of day to day? What is your office? What do you do at your office, and maybe how that has changed since November and January, if you can get into that a bit.
Sure. So it's an immigration law firm. We do 100% immigration and we focus on families. So we say we bring peace of mind and security to immigrant families, which means we do a lot of green card citizenship cases, a lot of what I call humanitarian cases for, asylum, victims
Yeah.
of human trafficking, all of that. So that's been what we've been doing for a decade. And what happens when a president like Trump is in office, which of course is like on fast track, furious fast track right now,
Right.
is we shift from, more like proactive affirmative filings to defensive detained work. So people are getting picked up or they're placed in proceedings and we're, helping protect them and save them as opposed to, oh, they come in and they, their child is finally turning 21 and they want to get a green
Yeah.
card. So it's still immigration, very different vibes for sure.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about how that reactive way of doing your work has kind of affected, everything. I mean, like, is it something where you have any sort of breathing room to get back to something looking like normal, or is it just really all hands on deck for whatever this frenzy is right now?
It's all hands on deck. We didn't see the same pace during the first
Right.
administration in terms of immigration enforcement, and he averaged the first time around about 4 policy changes a day in the 4 years that he was in office, and we're way beyond that this go around. So what it looks like is constantly trying to keep people updated about what's happening. And TPS was canceled, parole was revoked. What does this mean for Venezuelans? Getting the messaging
Right.
out to them, pivoting in their cases. And also what I'm noticing, and this is really sad. I hate to even say that this is happening, but I'm noticing a shift in my clients, new clients coming in, whereas in January and February, people are like, okay, this is scary. I need to do something about it. Let's get going. And now people are saying, like, I think maybe I'm just going to go home and
Mm,
just save my money in case I get deported and I need to buy a house in, El Salvador or something. And so it is like I'm sensing a bit of wind coming out of the sales of immigrants. And of course, all the people I work with are, they have options. They have a legal way to get status. That's why they're hiring me. So these are people who have something that they can do. And even those folks are, thinking maybe it's not worth it. So I would think that from the Trump administration's perspective, that's what they would want. And so unfortunately, I hate to say these words, but I think it's working.
so you're seeing kind of whether it's anecdotal or hard data, people saying kind of voluntarily leaving to say like this is not worth it.
It's anecdotal. It's not hard
Okay.
data.
Okay.
Uh, and I'm not seeing anybody actually leave. That's
Right.
the next level. I'm seeing people say, I'd rather not even fight. I don't even
Okay.
want to do what I need to do to get legal status because what's the point? Even if I do that, they're still going to pick me up and deport me. I think that's the key, is that people have lost faith in due process and justice. And,
Sure.
I think all of us are thinking a lot like that right now about, checks and balances and a democracy or republic, whatever you want to call it. Like, is all of this, at the end of the day, can we trust that if we follow the laws will take care of us? And I think that's what's being lost for sure in the immigrant community. Whereas it's like, even if I'm eligible for a green card, why would I even try? Because they're just going to pick me up and deport me or deny me. That's not actually true,
Yeah.
I should say. Like, the message that I want to send to people is, I 100% think it is still absolutely worth moving forward, and that the rule of law and due process, by and large, is being followed. But, these flights of Venezuelans to El Salvadoran prisons and that kind of stuff just starts to seep into the psyche, and you lose trust.
I think that erosion is something we should definitely talk about. I also want to ask first, like, we've seen a ton of this question changed from when we first started talking and setting up this meeting. I had first asked, I'd written this question down of like, well, Trump is just, typing stuff on truth.social and, saying like, oh, this is a decree. And then people were responding to them like they're actual laws being done. And people were saying, well, wait a second, this is not whatever. Now it does seem to be like these whims are having functional ramifications for real people in the country. Like, is that something you're seeing, like an acceleration of?
Yes, and I do think so far the judiciary is, holding things back a bit.
Yeah.
There's for example, birthright citizenship was one of the first executive orders, is the attempted revocation of that, which of course is in the 14th Amendment. The Supreme Court weighed in on that in the 1800s. I mean, very well settled, established law of the land that if you're born here, you're a U.S. citizen, cannot be revoked with executive order. And so initially the judges, came out and said, this is blatantly unconstitutional. We're issuing a nationwide injunction. And so I think that gave people some early confidence in the checks and balances of the judiciary. As of late, the Trump administration has asked the Supreme Court to revisit this idea of whether one federal judge can enjoin or issue an injunction over a policy nationwide. Now, it's probably the Supreme Court may not pick that up. That may not get reversed, but it's like, even that getting attacked makes everybody feel just a little bit like, oh, what's going to happen? And then I think the biggest scary, concerning thing lately has been, what I referenced, this flight of Venezuelans where, one of the things I've been thinking about, I don't know exactly why Venezuelans are such a target for this administration, which if you want to talk about that, we can, but they are. Okay. And so then there's this group of young men from Venezuela who have been accused of belonging to the gang Tren de Aragua. Most of their family members say they have no affiliation with these gangs.
And the signs are like they have a tattoo of like a baseball team, or like it's stuff that's like patently ridiculous that a ton of people have. It's just stuff that's bonkers. Yeah.
Or no tattoos at all.
Right. Exactly.
It's like, and of course they're not sharing what they're using as evidence against these young men, but then, the whole business of the flights were on their way to us. So first of all, sending people to Salvadoran prisons who are not from El Salvador. It's just like, that's just mind boggling in and of itself. And the whole thing of the Salvadoran prisons is, scary if you pay attention to and then the judge orders, verbally that the planes don't take off, and two of them are already in the air. One of them hadn't taken off, and then he orders them to turn around, and they don't turn around because they deny that a judge can issue a verbal order in this way. But that, it's like those planes still aren't back, and that was last week. And this is, here we are. This is the showdown, and I think this is the thing that should scare everybody, is at the moment at which the administration stops caring what the federal courts are telling it to do, then what? Then you follow that to its natural end, and it's, how is there even another election? When that occurs.
Yeah, so that erosion is really scary. I mean, we've seen the Venezuelans. Let's talk about the Venezuelan aspect of it for a moment, because we see in North Texas, we see a lot of Venezuelans.
Mhm.
There are a lot have come here looking for work. My dad teaches an ESL class for them every Saturday, and like it's very it's a growing community. Why do you think that these people are being targeted specifically?
I don't actually know. I think it's an easy population to use to scare people. So, of course, racism is at play in all of these, but
Of course,
racism against Venezuelans as opposed to other,
right,
Latin Americans, like they're not, darker skinned typically. So I don't
right,
know. I can't figure it out that way, but of course, there are increased numbers of Venezuelans who have been fleeing the Maduro regime.
right,
Millions of displaced Venezuelans around, mostly in South America, and of course, many coming here. So it could just be that that's the biggest numbers of migrants coming right
yeah,
now. And so therefore they are the scary bad guy. And it's the moment Trump declares that they are gang members and criminals, and then we find one or two test cases of a Venezuelan person committing a crime that
right,
then get blasted all over the media, and then people are watching completely different media. So some people, I think, really are consuming stories and media that tells them that the vast majority of Venezuelans are actually gang members and criminals. So
right,
but then why Venezuelans question, like on the part of the Trump administration, I mean, maybe it's just because there's so many of them, and
yeah,
it's effective from his
yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, yeah, it's easier to wrangle in some regard, I suppose. We talked about the Venezuelans going to the Salvadorian prison, which is so crazy.
Mm.
We've also seen Mahmoud Khalil, who was a green card holder, rounded up, put in an unmarked van, taken to a detention center, taken to Louisiana. Um, what? What do you tell to other green card holders in the US right now about their rights and kind of what they can, like, what would you say to them proactively that they could possibly do for their own protection?
Well, as much as I hate to utter these words, I think that it is unsafe for permanent residents to exercise free speech against the Trump administration right now,
Right,
because what they are doing is they're utilizing, you know, um, foreign policy, public safety grounds of deportability. So it's these sort of arcane provisions in the Immigration and Nationality Act that allow them to charge a green card holder as deportable, which then puts that person in deportation proceedings before a judge. And the judge and the prosecutor are part of the DOJ. So the
right,
immigration court system is actually part of the executive branch. It is not part of the judicial branch of the government. So once somebody's in this deportation proceedings, the executive still has quite a bit of authority over them. And so that's what they did with
okay.
Mahmoud Khalil. He hadn't been convicted of a crime, but
No,
they charge him as deportable in immigration proceedings. And of course, we're seeing a lot of that at the airports right now. People coming in, applying for admission, have very little rights. They're going to be searched. They could have their green cards. They can't have their status revoked by a CBP officer, but they can, have their card taken and be placed in proceedings. And I mean, I think, it's just the reality. Like, as a lawyer, I absolutely, like, it's like I almost want to cover my mouth. Like, I hate
right.
saying these words, but free speech is not safe for permanent residents in
You're
the United
you're
States.
you're a fiduciary for these people. You're telling them like this is how to like you want things to be different, but they're not different right now. So I know it
Right.
feels bad, but I can understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so upsetting how quickly we got here. But I think that, permanent residents who are in the United States who have not participated in, being super vocal against the administration or protests, or who have not been arrested for anything,
Right.
generally should not be, feeling scared living their day-to-day lives. But I've talked to so many green card holders who are just going to visit family, in Europe, and they're freaked about
Coming back.
coming home
Yeah.
and, seeing who, like, another thing that's been interesting lately is I've seen a lot of people, how on LinkedIn you can see who's checking you out.
Yeah.
they're noticing that government agencies are
Oh,
checking out their LinkedIn before they travel, which is also just like so
that's
eerie. Yeah.
terrifying. That's so
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's real, it's real. And I don't like, I'm a citizen, and I even think about like, I was going to drive to Canada this summer with my family. And I'm like, man,
Yeah.
maybe I'll stay on this side of the border.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know plenty of citizens who have wondered what the reentry process is going to be like, and I think probably most of us don't have anything to worry about, but the fact that we're even having the conversation is completely insane. I mean,
It's totally
it's
insane. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I will say citizens, we have a right to free speech. We cannot be deported, under some provision of the INA. We can refuse to have our devices searched at the airports. Now, they might confiscate them, but we don't have to
right,
turn over our passwords. They cannot deny us entry. They cannot detain us if we're not been charged with a crime. Now, whether there's like trumped up charges that are not real and all of that, but we do have rights. Citizens do have significant rights in this country, and so I don't intend. I mean, here's an example of like I'm not going quiet. And here we are talking. This is a public conversation,
sure,
but
yeah,
on Friday one of the memos that Trump issued was a directive to the attorney general to go after the immigration bar, which is
right.
immigration lawyers like me. And they said they specifically called out like big law pro bono lawyers, which is just, it's so bonkers. You think about like the pro bono cases,
Big law, yeah,
like
yeah.
that, like, so, the
You got that
evil pro
cigar hanging out of
bono.
your mouth, like, oh yeah, yeah, stupid, yeah,
And that, we're unscrupulous and we coach our clients to lie and all this stuff that just is
right.
totally untrue. But, I'm part of the immigration bar, and we're a pretty cohesive bunch, and we're used to fighting an uphill battle. And I don't, I think it was probably the wrong group to go after, is my sense. That like, it's not, I don't think the immigration bar by and large is going to just be like, oh, okay, we'll just stop, helping immigrants. It's like
Yeah.
we're all drawn to this work because we have such passion for it, and we're not here for the money. There's much more lucrative practice areas. So, but
I
anyway, standing
yeah.
up for one's rights, asserting one's rights is important, I think, in this era.
I want to ask about kind of the legal community real quick, because we've seen Perkins Coie, a really big law firm that is one of those big law kind of giant firms that has kind of stood up to some degree against this erosion of law that's happening. And we've seen other firms and other attorneys really buckle under this pressure and try to give them anything that they want. Um, are you are you encouraged by what you're seeing at all from some firms, or are you kind of in a moment where you're like panicked and freaking out about some of that stuff?
Yeah, my sense is that the legal community is feeling disappointed
Yeah,
by the response of big law,
yeah,
and a lot of the law firms right
yeah.
now. And that, I mean, it's sort of like what we're watching Congress do, just sort of lay
Oh,
down
I
and let
know.
it happen. And it's like, what is happening? What is
Uh,
happening? And
well,
so I think
what do we gain by just letting them roll over us? It's just it's strange, but yeah.
it's a bizarre thing. It's like, how they say, car wrecks, you feel like you're in slow motion
Hmm.
while
Yeah,
it's happening. It feels
yeah,
like that. Like, have you had that experience where you're like, I'm just making my coffee in the morning and,
totally.
taking my kids to school, and is
And
everything
my rights are not where they were a week ago.
yeah.
My trans friends' rights are
Oh,
not where they were a week ago. It's like it's just it's everyone and everything, and it's all the time, and we're just here doing our little stupid work. And I've got my podcast. Ooh, it's like, yeah, it feels completely crazy. Yeah,
well, I mean, don't discount what you're doing, because
right,
I
right. I
think,
know.
I mean, I know you know this, but like, and to the people watching, it's like, just don't go quiet, don't go
Yeah,
silent. Like, keep talking about stuff on the social media or wherever, because that then it's all over
yeah,
if we all just go quiet. So
yeah, yeah. No, that's
podcasts
totally
matter,
true. Yeah, no, sure.
Mhm.
Okay, I this is something that I think is so basic and so fundamental that I think Americans don't actually have a grasp, and I certainly don't, of how you become a citizen
Mm.
in 2025. What is that process like, and why is it complex? And could it be simplified?
Oh, great question. And yeah, I'll just say we haven't had an overhaul, like a complete reform of the structure of the system
Yeah.
since 1965. It
Crazy.
was, yeah,
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, we
Yeah.
had, amnesty under Reagan in the 80s that sort of, regularized or gave legal status to a bunch of undocumented people. And then Clinton in the late 90s passed a new immigration system that created actually more penalties. It was more harsh. But
Yeah.
neither of those things overhauled the way that the system functions. And so what we have is this scenario in our country where, our baby boomers are aging. I mean,
Hmm.
stats abound. For the first time ever, we have more people over the age of 75 than under the age of 15, in the last
Right.
5 years. And for the first time ever, immigrants were the reason for any population growth in this country since 1850.
Yeah.
So it's just clear as day that our way through and economically is to have more immigration and more immigrants in this country. So we have jobs and we have a need for immigrants, but in decades, Congress has not acknowledged that need and passed immigration reform. So the ways that people become citizens today are the same way they did, 50 years ago, which is
Right.
primarily through family relationships. So, brother, parent, spouse, or child of a U.S. citizen. And many of those categories have wait times where, for example, the Mexican brother of a U.S. citizen is currently waiting 25 years to get their green card. Children, same deal. It's just like absurdly ridiculous. Like people die while
Of
they're waiting.
course. Yeah.
And that's 60% plus of the ways that people immigrate. Then we have a slim, way for people to come through employment, but typically it's only highly skilled
Right.
employees. There's not really a functioning system for the lower skilled, agricultural workers or even just, workers at a gas station to come and
Right.
get a job and even stay temporarily and then go back. Like this idea of circular labor migration would really benefit us, and it's what a lot of migrants would want to do, but we don't have a system for that in place.
Right.
And so there's, a fraction of that, but similarly, in order for workers to get status, they often wait a decade or longer, and they're stuck in a job, and there can be abuse at the workplace when people are stuck there.
Yeah.
And then the other ways people do it, which a lot of what I do is humanitarian cases. So I work with a lot of crime victims, trafficking victims, domestic violence victims, asylum seekers, generally people who have like suffered something either abroad or in the US, and we work toward getting them some sort of like humanitarian protection because of that. But it's just, it doesn't get anywhere close to meeting the needs, not of the immigrants. Like, because I'm
Right.
motivated from a humanitarian angle because I love immigrants. I think they're amazing,
Yeah.
and I think we should create space for them. But like from an economic, fiscal perspective, for the people who are unmoved by the stories, it is just flat out common sense that we need to
Right.
expand immigration. But the thing is, in order for that to happen, we'd have to have an honest conversation about actually needing immigrants. Immigration would have to start being a good word. And then,
Yeah.
people the conservative base wouldn't be as upset as they
Well,
are if Trump all of a sudden started saying, you know what, we actually need immigrants. Well, then there would go a lot of his support.
yeah. I mean, there's this kind of, because I come at it from such a, we were built as this melting pot, like, and I like, it might be corny, but it's like I kind of buy into that. Like that's kind of one of those things that's like I really love that about this country. And from a cultural, humanitarian, all that stuff makes a lot of sense. There is this kind of center left talking point of like, well, who's gonna do the dishwashing jobs, which like kind of frustrates me when I hear that, because I'm like, I don't think we need to be looking at this situation as just this kind of like, well, how productive can you be for us kind of thing. But to your point, there is a lot of work to be done, and it's not just it's just everywhere. There's a lot of economic benefit to having people come here and integrate into our systems, and the fact that we make it so much harder seems like a massive expense for us that we just decide to never fix. And I think that's why I get frustrated with, I don't know, just the way we talk about it.
exactly.
I don't
I
know.
totally agree with everything that you just said. I mean, we need to switch the conversation around it. And I think it's an
Yeah.
easy out, to your point, to say, dirty jobs. We need the immigrants for the dirty jobs.
It's a weird point to make, you know?
Well, it's disrespectful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. It's also true. I
Right.
mean, but there's also engineering jobs and tech
Of
jobs
course.
and nannying jobs and
Right.
construction jobs and entrepreneurial innovators and
Right.
it's like all levels. We need immigrants on all of these
Yeah.
levels in order to function as a society. And
Yeah.
the beauty of this country has been, I don't know if this will continue, that this is the land of opportunity,
Yeah.
that people want to come here, that we could solve our economic issues with the flip of a switch. All we have to do to get more labor in our labor force is say, we want more labor from the rest of the world, and they would be here
Right.
in a minute.
Yeah.
But we won't do it. We won't
Yeah.
do it because it's too powerful to tell people that there are invaders, and then it gets them to the polls and it gets them just sort of blindly supporting Doge actions, et cetera. And I think that's to the question of why Venezuela, because Venezuelan gang criminals scares the crap out of people, and then they'll let
Right.
Trump do whatever he wants as long as
Yeah.
he's fixing that non-existing problem.
Yeah. Well, we'll leave it there. Kate, this has been really good for me, certainly. Hopefully good for our listeners as well. I'll give you the floor to plug whatever you want for the next 30 seconds or so.
Sure. Well, I'll just say you're obviously a great interviewer, and I
Oh,
can
thanks.
see why you have followers. So it's an honor for me to have been here. And here's what I'll plug. On my website, I have a bunch of resources for people, including
Right.
a safety planning packet for families with important documents to collect and agreements to protect the children if the parents get picked up. So that's that abogadakate.com under the resources page. And it's something that people can share with immigrants who are scared and help them get ready.
Perfect. So I will put that link also in our show notes so you can check that out on the show notes or on the website, vgbs.com. Kate, thank you again so much. And hopefully we'll do this again soon when the country's not on fire. That'd be great.
Yeah, or if it's still on fire, we can do it.
We could do it again.
Yeah. But hopefully that former.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.